This is Marc Camille Chaimowicz. He is born in the post-World War II Paris in 1947. Marc's main idea is to dissolve the line between art and design, as well as the boundary of public and private. His work consists of many different mediums. He uses fashion, textiles, interior design, sculpture, performance, installation, architecture, painting, and photography. All of Marc's works are shown off to the public indoors at his own exhibitions or in special events. This piece here, which was on display at the Jewish Museum in New York City in 2018, is my favorite piece of Marc's, because he decided to tilt the dresser on its axis instead of keeping it flat on the ground, which might catch your attention when you first walk into the room. Marc uses many different objects for his artworks when he's designing a room. It may look crazy, but it's all a part of the idea he has. Marc Chaimowicz does not limit the size of the art that he makes. He can make some pretty huge pieces, while other times he makes much smaller works, like this ashtray he made in 2015, or these photos he took that are only 4 by 6 inches. I've pulled a piece of a documentary so you can hear how his mind works and the thought process he goes through while coming up with ideas for his artwork.
Can you tell me a little bit about how the exhibition started? What were the kind of first ideas that came to mind when we offered you the exhibition here?
The first thing I did was ask for floor plans. I then began doodling and coming up with various possibilities. I think from the start I've seen this project as very much about a layering of dialogues, a dialogue between the work and the spaces, a dialogue between the team and myself, a dialogue within the works, a dialogue with regard to materials, a dialogue certainly with regard to the world of interiors as a kind of print dialogue. I think I was from the start keen to bring in the gallery itself as a kind of by proxy participant.
The first thing that struck me when we started working was that you had actually exhibited here in 1972. Perhaps we could talk a little bit about Work Enough Tyranny, because in this exhibition we've decided 44 years later to restage the work in exactly the same West Gallery.
The work stays the same, but the context in which the work is seen changes, and therefore the work changes, because the reading of the work changes. I've been thinking about the revisitation of Enough Tyranny. I've been wondering whether it's actually easier for your public to understand or to enjoy or to acknowledge what is in the West Gallery now than they would have done 44 years ago, when I think that way of working was still so atypical or so radical or so alien. I mean, I remember a letter from the Arts Council asking me what size van would be needed for the collection of the paintings to be exhibited.
So they expected something quite different.
I think they probably did, yeah. They certainly didn't expect live fish, which I actually brought in myself in buckets on a bus from Harrods. But I think that's a kind of metaphor of how visual art practice invariably, I think, stretches boundaries, does it not? And I like to think it's happening in the East Gallery. I remember as we were installing, Lizzie very early on said, "It's lovely to see the windows again." So given we knew we would acknowledge the windows, it therefore meant that we were able to curtain the windows, and also it meant that we could, I suppose, in terms of a footfall, we could conclude the walkthrough of the 4 galleries with a photographic reference to the initial function of the building as harbouring tea rooms. I mean, there's perhaps also another metaphor in terms of light, and that is that the West Gallery is self-lit. It's almost a night-like environment, because the windows have been so severely filtered, so that the lighting is actually electric rather than natural. So there's a sort of cycle here in terms of time, whereby we begin with night light sensibility and we conclude with a daytime sensibility. And I think the axis of this gallery, the east to west axis, can therefore be acknowledged and self-referenced within the exhibition project.
Perhaps we can talk a little bit about the sculpture in the North Gallery for MVDR, which comprises 9 painted marble panels leaning against the north wall.
This piece has only been shown once on the occasion of the Berlin Biennale, and it was a critique of Mies van der Rohe's attitude, which is rigorously dogmatic and very fixed and inhuman. And with this remarkable building of his in Berlin, the one concession he'd made to the rectilinear were these pillar-like units clad in a very organic material in a quartz marble. And so I thought I'd qualify that by, in a way, decorating it, which of course would have been anathema to the master. And so here it has a quietude, it has a kind of a magnitude, I guess, and it also, of course, has a greater sense of autonomy because it's on a monochromatic background. So it was a risk that we took, which has hopefully been justified.
Mm-hmm. I think lastly, we must touch again on the different guests in the exhibition that you've kind of invited and selected to the show. So first of all, there's a painting by Edouard Fourier, and secondly, a film by the choreographer and dancer Michael Clark. Perhaps you could talk about why you've selected these 2 artists.
My premise was that it would be interesting to have a French artist from another time, counterpointed by a London-based artist, still working, and Michael for me is very London. So I think that's the axis for me.
Mm-hmm.
London and Paris, and 20th century and 21st century. So it's a kind of time base. But it's also the case that he was very struck by the sunsets of the rehearsal studios, which play a part in the edit.
I'm really honored that I was able to present on Marc Camille Chaimowicz. He's incredibly talented and has an expansive range of artwork that extends through all mediums.